Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show for you. We're going to go over all of the news, including some updates from stories we've done earlier this week, with the White Sox getting a win, Brandon Ayuk updates, as well as Lauri Markkanen getting an extension with the Jazz worth 5 years, $238 million, the biggest extension ever given out in the history of the Utah Jazz. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Jim Harbaugh and his issues in Michigan as they just handed out a punishment for some recruiting violations, not the scandal with Connor Stallions this season, but we'll talk about that, what he received, before getting a little bit into the New England Patriots as we continue our series going over every single NFL team, giving a record prediction for their season. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to the link, go to that button right below the video, leave a super chat if you're here on YouTube. If you are not, go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave a comment, leave a chat. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today with some updates of stories we covered earlier this week, starting off with the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes. We had an update. The New England Patriots, one of the front runners in this trade, it was them and the Browns. The Steelers got into it at the end. They're still in it now, so it's still a two-horse race, but the New England Patriots, officially drop out of the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes. Now, there isn't a 100% guaranteed reason why. The Patriots were reported to be the ones offering the most amount of money to Brandon Ayuk. They were the ones that were reportedly giving him the top 5 money at his position, which would have been, in my opinion, a little bit of an overpay. But right now the Patriots have the money to spend. They just drafted a quarterback. It's a place that, they need to improve desperately. But they put out a statement saying, hey, we've decided to pull out of the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes so that we can focus more on the development of our young guys, which on its own is not necessarily a bad thing. But when we're looking at a guy like Brandon Ayuk, he could absolutely have helped the Patriots, and it doesn't feel like they pulled out of this just because. I feel like this is something that Brandon Ayuk's camp turned down more than anything else. As far as who's still in it, we still have a head-to-head battle, I guess you would say, between two AFC North teams, the Steelers and the Browns. Both of those teams desperately need receivers. There has been a lot of talk surrounding Amari Cooper going back. I think that would be a mistake if you send Amari Cooper and picks. I think you lose that trade. While, Brandon Ayuk is younger than Amari Cooper is, he isn't that much better than Amari Cooper that you need to send picks and a receiver at the level of Amari Cooper over to get this deal done, on top of also paying Brandon Ayuk. So we'll see what happens. It's been messy. He's been Brandon Ayuk has been the main character of this offseason because of how messy it's been, right? There's been lots of ups, downs, twists, and turns to this story. It has not made a lot of sense. I apologize. As far as another story that we're updating on, we did a story a couple of days ago about the Chicago White Sox. The Chicago White Sox, who are the worst team in baseball, are in competition to be the worst team of all time in baseball. Good news for them. They officially, now with a win against the Athletics, not only have snapped a 21 game losing streak, which is tied for the longest in the history of the American League with the Baltimore Orioles. They beat the Athletics last night 5-1. Not only did they break that infamous run that they were on, but they now officially cannot have a worse record than the 1899 Cleveland Spiders. Congratulations to the Chicago White Sox. That is a huge accomplishment. You are not going to be the worst team in the history of baseball, just in the modern era, maybe. There's still a lot of baseball to play. Who knows? Maybe the White Sox go on a run and finish 30 games below 500 instead of 70. But we will have to see what happens in the south side of Chicago there. It's a shame, honestly. Like as much as I never want to prey on the downfall of an organization, as much as I never want to sit here and say, "Oh, the White Sox, I want them to lose games." The White Sox organization is so poorly run, and I've seen this take. I think I saw this take from a couple of people. But what we saw from the Pistons this season, when they were on their losing streak, how much media attention they got and how it actually got them to make changes in the organization. You look at their offseason, and while it wasn't the greatest, it got them to, make some of the right changes, made a change at coach that probably wouldn't have happened. They probably would have just sat on their hands and done nothing if they hadn't gone on that streak. The White Sox just got this media attention. They didn't keep this going for long enough that I think it's going to really, bring a lot of negative attention to their organization. This is an organization that has been extremely poorly run for a very long time. It's up in contention for being one of the worst run organizations in all of major American sports, right? You have an ownership group that's cheap. You have a team that, had a lot of promise in 2020, but whether it be by mismanagement or players just not working out, they completely collapsed and become a laughingstock, one of the worst teams in baseball. And not just the worst team in baseball this year, but one of the worst teams all time. It's poor management. They need to make a systemic change in their organization. And as much as I didn't want to sit here and root for them to keep losing, they needed to keep losing just a little bit longer. Get to like 25 straight losses or something. Just lose a couple more games before you win, and you're going to have an avalanche of media questioning the owners, questioning the GM, seeing what kind of changes they're going to make, seeing what they're going to do. And it's a tough situation to be in. It really is a tough situation to be in if you are a White Sox fan, player, especially player that just got traded to the White Sox from the Dodgers. But congratulations to them for getting a win. It is something that I'm sure was kind of like a sigh of relief on those guys. You saw it on their faces if you watched it after that final out. They were trying not to celebrate too much, but the pitcher who came in and closed out the game came in and gave a little bit of a smirk on his face. He was trying not to smile. He was holding it in a little bit. The left fielder who came in to catch the pop-up for the last out, was right. It was in shallow left field, kind of where a meeting point between the shortstop, third baseman, and the left fielder would all be. They all kind of looked at each other like, whew, like a monkey came off their back. And that is a good feeling. That's a good feeling, right? Look, this is a White Sox team that hasn't had a lot to celebrate all season long. This is a White Sox team that hasn't had a lot to celebrate really in a really long time, right? This is a White Sox team that needed something. And I don't want to sit out here and say, hey, they should have lost more, which probably would have been better in the long term. But for the mentals of these players, for these players on this White Sox team right now, for the guys that are out there playing on the field, this was a huge monkey off of their backs. They're just going to be able to go out there and continue to play losing baseball without all this media coverage. Now, that's not to say they're just going to go back and lose 20 more games in a row, right? We don't expect that to happen. But with this White Sox team, we never know. But there was a feeling of finally, that seemingly washed over that entire White Sox clubhouse. And hopefully this gets them loose, especially in a long season like baseball is. You never want to be stuck in that feedback loop of sucking, because that sucks. It just does. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to take a quick little jump over to the NBA, talk a little bit about Lauri Markkanen, the 7-foot Finnish player who had a resurgent year since he came to Utah. We're going to talk about him getting a massive new contract and everything that is surrounding that situation. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about a couple of updated stories that we've covered earlier this week, including the White Sox breaking their losing streak after tying up the all-time losing record in the AL. 21 straight games they lost before winning last night 5-1 in Oakland. We also talked a little bit about Brandon Ayuk, an update to his situation as the Patriots are officially out of the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes. Look for for an update to come to that situation. Any point, any situation, it could happen right now for all I know. This is an ever evolving situation here with the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk. In this segment though, we're going to move over to the NBA, talk about a massive contract given out, an extension given to Lauri Markkanen, the Finnish player, the reigning NBA comeback player of the year. Finnish Athlete of the Year, just signed a massive 5-year, $238 million contract. We'll talk everything that's surrounding him in that situation there. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you have to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, or there should be a button on the bottom of the YouTube there if you are watching on YouTube to do a super chat. If you do leave a donation with a tip or donation with a message in it, that message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NBA, talk a little bit about Lauri Markkanen and the Utah Jazz. Lauri Markkanen signs a brand new 5-year, $238 million contract. It's an extension that takes him through, that makes him the highest paid player in Jazz history. This is the biggest contract ever given out by the Jazz, and it's really exciting that Lauri Markkanen gets this contract. He was a top 10 pick back in 2017. 2017, that, believe it or not, was 7 years ago, and he finally breaks out after being traded to the Jazz. He had bounced around a bunch, was on the Chicago Bulls, kind of faded into role player obscurity there, moves over to the Cavs, has a resurgent season, is kind of treated as a sixth man, gets traded to Utah in the Donovan Mitchell trade, and now is looking like a star, a guy that was in conversations to be this major trade piece that the Warriors were looking at. And that is one of the bigger things that has to do with this contract. So we'll start right there, right? There was a lot of reporting given out this offseason about the Warriors trying to reopen their title window, reopen their title contention window so that Steph Curry can go out competitive, so that Steph Curry can continue to, be the greatest shooter of all time on a competitive team, right? They're unequivocally worse than they were in their dynasty, right? You can't sit here and tell me that they are no longer true contenders in a really, really tough Western Conference. And one of those guys that was out there potentially for trade was the Utah Jazz, Lauri Markkanen. He was a guy who had, like I said, coming off a breakout season. He's a 7-footer, finally coming into himself, shooting 40% from three on pretty heavy quantity, 8 shots a night. That's really good shooting. Fits well into a system of Steve Kerr that is revolved around ball movement and shooting. He can move the ball great for a 7-footer, and he's great defensively as well. Now, the issue is the Jazz and Danny Ainge, who is one of the best executives of the modern era, very good at getting value back for these players, was asking for a lot. They were asking for some young players as well as draft picks, and good on the Warriors, I will say, for not just saying, screw it. We're going all in. We want to win another title for Steph. Steph is the greatest Warrior of all time. We want him to go out on top. We want to treat him right. We're going to mortgage our future for a shot. For a shot, you bring in Lauri Markkanen, which, if I'm being honest, as great as Lauri Markkanen has become, he is not turning that Warriors team into a championship level roster. And you can try and duck your head in the sand and say, oh, they add another player, it's going to be great, it's going to be reigniting the dynasty. It's not. That team is decaying, right? And it's a slow decay, don't get me wrong, but it is still a decay. It's something that's going to continue to happen just as players get older and, contracts get worse. We've seen, especially with the new CBA, getting into the second apron, the luxury tax is something that is really tough to deal with, especially for these teams that have these aging superstars. You look at the Suns, you look at the Clippers. It was so tough for them to stay below the second apron, to stay a competitive team below that apron with the stars that they have, the stars that they had to re-sign to be a competitive team in, again, a really, really competitive Western Conference. Lauri Markkanen, in his new contract, is not going anywhere, at least for the year. In the contract, there's language that states he cannot be traded for the next 6 months, which means he cannot be traded until February 6th at the earliest, which is past the NBA trade deadline. So he will be with the Jazz for at least one more season, basically saying, hey, you're not going anywhere, you're staying in Utah. And I think that's the best move both for the Warriors and for Lauri Markkanen. I think what Lauri Markkanen brings to the table as far as an offensive and defensive skill set, they're building around him in Utah. And we've seen how if they don't build around him, if they treat him as more of a tertiary or secondary piece in some of these lineups in Cleveland, in Chicago, how he hasn't been able to be that guy. And maybe he has developed to be able to, be a guy that still can be extremely effective as a second or third option, but he's the first option over there in Utah. And, maybe he's not leading this team that isn't on the same timeline as him to a championship, maybe even not to the playoffs, again, in a very, very stacked West. But he is going to continue to be a great player if they continue to play around him like they're doing in Utah. And that's not to say that Steve Kerr and the Warriors couldn't have done that, but it also would have been a mistake for the Warriors. And I think it would have been a bigger mistake for the Warriors than anything else, because they would have mortgaged their future for something that wasn't even worth it. They're not going to win a championship with the addition of Lauri Markkanen, just to put it frankly. He is not good enough of a player to push them over, play teams like the Mavs, to push them over teams like the Nuggets, to push them over teams like the Timberwolves, push them over teams like the Thunder. These teams that are already built, they're young, they have a core together. These Warriors are not better than these teams, even with, Lauri Markkanen being added to it. It's not. So I think this is probably the best outcome for every team, right? Now, the Utah Jazz, I'm sure they would have loved to get pods and a bunch of firsts. But, you get Lauri Markkanen. He's the captain of your team. He can help, teach your guys how to play. He can help you teach your guys how to develop in a not winning situation, not give up. He had that perseverance to continue to grow and become this great basketball player that he is now. So overall, I think this is probably the best move. Lauri Markkanen gets a 5-year extension, the biggest extension in the history of the Utah Jazz. Go enjoy your money. $238 million is pretty solid. Excuse me. But anyway, let me know what you think. Should the Jazz have traded? Should the Warriors have traded for Lauri Markkanen? Let me know what you think in the comments. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about Michigan. Michigan football. Jim Harbaugh is gone, but his effects of what he did to get Michigan their first championship since 1997 is still being felt. There were some some recruiting violations, punishments were handed out today. We'll get into that, as well as maybe some talk about prospective punishments for the future of Michigan football in the wake of the Connor Stallion stuff that's going on over there. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC. College football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Lauri Markkanen getting the biggest extension in the history of the Utah Jazz. 5 years, $238 million for the Finnish athlete of the year, I should say. He stays in Utah for the foreseeable future as their leader. He also has a modified no trade clause where he can't get traded for the next 6 months, which keeps him in Utah for at least the entirety of this upcoming NBA season. We also talked about some updates from stories we covered earlier in the week. We talked about Brandon Ayuk. The Patriots have dropped out of the sweepstakes to trade for the talented young receiver, as well as the White Sox snapping the 21-game losing streak that they were on with a chance to make infamous history, I will say, tying the Orioles for the longest losing streak in the history of the American League, beating the Oakland Athletics 5-1 last night. In this segment here, we're going to transition into some college football news. There's been a lot going on in there, whether that be, NIL stuff getting figured out, conference realignment, the Power 4, the new college football program. But today we're going to talk about Michigan. Michigan is under the headlights once again. They've been through investigation after investigation after investigation, and there's still more punishments to come. But the first round of punishments have dropped today. This is about some COVID-related recruitment violations. We'll talk about what those are and what it means for Jim Harbaugh, who is now over with the the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll talk about all that and more in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, or if you are on YouTube, go and click that super chat button, leave a super chat, a tip, or a donation. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some Michigan scandal stuff. The Michigan Wolverines have been doing a lot of stuff. I will say lots of different recruiting violations, lots of different investigations. The first round of punishments dropped. Jim Harbaugh, who was the head coach, he came back after coaching the 49ers, a very successful tenure in the NFL, comes back to his alma mater, leads Michigan to its first national title since 1997 with a perfect season last year, and then heads off to coach the Los Angeles Chargers. So all of this kind of feels like, excuse me, all of this kind of feels like a slap on the wrist to him. It doesn't affect him, but what it does is affect the Michigan program and new head coach, or former offensive coordinator turned head coach, Sharon Moore. This first round of punishments that got handed out, and I do say first round because I guarantee you more are to come, has to do with a couple of recruiting violations that took place in 2021 due to COVID restrictions. The allegations are Jim Harbaugh went and met with a couple of different recruits and their families, invited them into the facility at a point where it was against the rules to do that. COVID was going on. It was virtual only. You can't physically meet them. He went out to a diner with multiple families at least twice, is what the reports are saying, and invited them to the Michigan football facilities, gave them a little bit of a tour. What this results in, and it might sound a little harsh, is 4-year punishment. Jim Harbaugh gets a 4-year show cause order, and I'll explain what that means in a second. They say, and I'm gonna quote this from the COI. Harbaugh, quote, violated recruiting and inducement rules, engaged in unethical conduct, failed to promote an atmosphere of compliance, and violated head coach responsibility obligations. So basically, what this 4-year show cause order does is, for Harbaugh, practically nothing. Harbaugh is no longer in the NCAA. This is not a 4-year penalty that will affect him if and when he comes back to college football. This is something that is going to start as of today, 4 years. And, it's not going to matter. He's in the NFL. Now, there is also a 1-year suspension that will get served whenever he comes back. This is more a slap on the wrist for the Michigan program. The Michigan program that this has been under investigation for a long time, right? This is part of an investigation that has been going on for a while. Back, obviously, this stuff happened in 2021, and we're still waiting on the major investigation, the stuff that came out from this season with them going and scouting future opponents, with Connor Stallions going undercover at a couple of games, going on the sidelines of Eastern Michigan, having his whole super spy program going on. But this is an interesting thing, because I think this is really going to affect Michigan football going forward. There's going to be more stuff going forward. This alone is not a big deal. Sharon Moore got a code 2 violation, while Harbaugh got the code 1, which is worse. But Sharon Moore is the head coach now, and if he continues to rack up these punishments, these violations, it's going to start affecting this football team. This is a Michigan team that, Harbaugh's gone. It's still going to be a great football team. Michigan always will be a great football team, but reaching the heights that they have the last couple seasons, always being in contention for the playoffs, eventually winning the national title this year, there's there's not really a a great reason. Uh, there's going to be a fall off here, I should say. And Jim Harbaugh is not really going to feel any of it, which kind of sucks for the players, for the Michigan alumni, and they're not going to come after Jim Harbaugh for this. He won them a title. This is in their eyes all worth it, and I can't really blame them. But a lot of the ferocity, the amount of the amount of this punishment is more of the fact that Michigan and Jim Harbaugh lied to the investigators and then they caught them. If they had just told them the truth, yeah, hey, I met up with some guys, it would have just been a slap on the wrist. They wouldn't have gotten this 4-year show cause. I feel like that is a lot more. And some Michigan fans are saying, hey, they're after us. They've always hated Michigan. And, maybe they have. But the amount of times that Michigan under Harbaugh just in the last 4 years has gone against violations, and Michigan has suspended him a couple times. Each time the NCAA, excuse me, eventually punishes them. It is definitely not a good look for Michigan. So I don't think that this punishment itself is really going to affect it too much. I don't think that this punishment itself is going to make Michigan and its football team fall off a cliff, but I think this is the start of losing its top tier dominance that it had beforehand. But anyway, let me know what you think of this, if it really is even going to matter at all. I think the stuff that's going to come out that's going to indicate Sharon Moore is going to affect it more than anything with Jim Harbaugh, because he is out of the NCAA, and the NCAA, for all intents and purposes, cannot touch him anymore. But yeah, let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to finish off our show in these next 2 segments talking about the New England Patriots. The Patriots, we're going to go over their offseason. We're going over every single NFL team. Excuse me. With just 29 days until the kickoff of the NFL season, we have just a few more teams to go through. We finish up the AFC East today. 3 more divisions to get through. 12 teams. We'll get there by the beginning of the NFL season. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts. Sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines getting their first round of punishments from the NCAA, this one having to do with recruiting violations during the COVID restrictions, where Jim Harbaugh met with a few families from recruits, showed them the facility in a time where you weren't allowed to do in-person meetings. Excuse me. Earlier on, we talked about Lauri Markkanen getting the biggest extension in Utah Jazz history, a 5-year, $238 million deal. Massive contract for him. He does not get traded to the Warriors. It's going to be at least 1 year with the Jazz, as he has a modified no trade clause where he can't get traded until February 6th, which is past the NBA trade deadline this season. Now, We also covered in our first segment some updates from stories we covered earlier on in the week, including the White Sox breaking their 21-game losing streak, winning 5-1 against the Oakland Athletics, as well as the Brandon Ayuk updates as the New England Patriots, which we'll talk about in just a second, are dropping out of the sweepstakes to go and get the young, talented wide receiver. In this segment, like I alluded to just a second ago, we're talking about those New England Patriots. We're continuing our series of covering every single NFL team. Starting, we finished up the AFC. We finished up the NFC. We're finishing up the AFC East today, so we'll get a full AFC East picture at the end of our show. We're going to start off doing an off-season review for the Patriots. Go over their draft, go over their signings, go over everything they lost, everything they gained, and give them a grade for it. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube on the GSMC Sports channel, all you need to do is hit that super chat button. If you do either of those things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw it in the chat. Throw it in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the New England Patriots. New England Patriots off-season to start here. The Patriots have had an interesting offseason, right? And obviously the big story with the Patriots is they kind of hit the reset button more than they already had before. You know, it's hard to fully hit the reset button if you're already the third worst team in football, but they hit the reset button. They let go of legendary head coach Bill Belichick, who ran the show for more than 24 years. He's been there forever. He's been there since before I was born. So this is the first football season I will ever experience without Bill Belichick coaching a football team, which is kind of insane to say. Bill Belichick was a legend, and his while he did at the end kind of struggle without an offense that had any juice at all, his defense was still elite. You can say whatever you want about Bill Belichick as a head coach, as a GM, about how he kind of failed a little bit down the road, being not great at drafting, and he never really was the greatest drafter, but you can't say anything about his defense. He's one of the greatest defensive coaches in the history of football, even with a bunch of nobodies. You know, their biggest name on defense, probably Matthew Judon, was gone all of last season due to injury, you know, and they still had the 9th best defense in football by DVOA. That is not an easy thing to do on I won't say on what I will call a starless football team. Now, that is not to say that there aren't great players on that defense, because you can't, regardless of the scheme, you know, you can't have a great defense without good players, right? Bill Belichick elevates all of them. And that is why he is one of the best, if not the best, defensive coach in the history of football. He is that special. Now, they replace him with Jerod Mayo. Jerod Mayo, who was a linebacker for the Patriots for 8 seasons, was always going to be the successor, it seemed like, to Bill Belichick, although for a long time it felt like Josh McDaniels was going to be that guy, but after 2 failed experiments as a head coach, and almost a third one, as he agreed to a contract with Indianapolis and turned around that whole saga. This is not about Josh McDaniels. It became pretty clear it was always going to be Jerod Mayo. Jerod Mayo, you know, it's not like it's a complete departure from the culture, the Patriot way, but it is a new face and fresh ideas, getting the old stale air out, I guess. And again, that's kind of rude to Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, like I said, was still doing what he does best at the highest level last season. So it's not like he was bad, ever was a bad coach. He just needed an offensive guy, and he needed a quarterback like Tom Brady to power the offense, and they didn't have it. They had no weapons, and Mac Jones, for whatever reason, fell off a cliff after his rookie season. He's gone now as well, and what they've done is they've started fresh, clean slate, new coach, new GM, new quarterback. They draft Drake May, third overall, a pick that had a lot of people, that had a lot of teams wanting to trade up for. We saw on Hard Knocks the Giants willing to give a lot for Drake May. We saw a couple of other teams trying to trade up for that third overall pick. The Patriots sit pat, take Drake May third overall in what they're hoping is the future of their franchise. Now, Drake May is a guy that when at the beginning of the draft cycle, I was very low on. I watched some more film. I got a little higher on him. Now he wasn't ever my favorite guy. He's coming into training camp, and there's going to be growing pains, right? He's a gunslinger. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's plenty of gunslingers. Josh Allen is an example of a gunslinger. Brett Favre, gunslinger. These guys, they get into some trouble with interceptions, but they're still great players. Now, I'm not giving Drake May comps to those guys. I think he's a different player than both Josh Allen and Brett Favre, but there is potential there. Now, there are rumblings out of camp that it's not really going great. And again, growing pains heading into the NFL, an elite defensive unit. It's not necessarily going to be an easy change that you can make, a change that you can just go like, boom, and I am back. I'm the best player on this team, right? But but they don't need him to be CJ Stroud, right? It'd be great if he was CJ Stroud. I'm sure every team that drafted a quarterback is like, all right, if you're CJ Stroud, we'll be so happy. But no one is expecting him to have that CJ Stroud, Andrew Luck rookie type season, right? No one is expecting that out of these guys. Maybe Caleb Williams has that expectations thrown on him, but that is unfair to put on him. You don't get that kind of rookie season production just out of anywhere, especially in New England, where now that they're officially out of that Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes, they did a good job of trying to shore up that skill position. They still have Ramondre Stevenson at running back, who I really like as a workhorse back. They brought in KJ Osborne, who with the Vikings was one of my favorite underrated receivers. I really like what he can do. He's a shifty player. He's great with the ball in his hands in open space, and I think he can work really well in that offense. They have a nice speed guy in Demario Douglas that, while he didn't score a touchdown last season and was hurt, showed a lot of potential in flashes. They have Kendrick Bourne, who I'm a big Kendrick Bourne fan from his days with the 49ers. Again, not big enough to say he's a wide receiver, bona fide wide receiver one, but this is a wide receiver room that has some upside to it, right? You also add in the draft pick of Jalen Polk. This is not the worst unit in football. They all have some solid tight ends. In Hunter Henry, and they have some in Hunter Henry as well. This is a good team. The offensive line needs some work. The defense, I'm curious if it's going to take a step forward or step back. They didn't make too many huge additions defensively, but they are losing the defensive mind of one of the greatest defensive minds in the history of football. That is not an easy thing to just come in and say, we'll be fine. It's just Bill Belichick that we're losing. I'm curious to see how far, if at all, the defense falls, because Gerard Mayo is just a chip off the old block. He's just a limb of the Belichick tree, and there hasn't really been too many successful Belichick tree guys that came out of New England. So I'm curious if this is going to be something that can flourish, or if this is something that you just gotta chop off soon. And a successful season for the Patriots is going to look more like just promise, right? There's not a lot in New England to sit here and say, oh, I expect them to win the division. This is a tough division. They have Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. They have Tua and the Dolphins. They have Josh Allen and the Bills. These are three great teams that are in their division, right? No matter how you slice it, the Patriots, I think, are on just a completely lower level than all three of those teams. Now, are all three of those teams on the same level? Similar, probably not, but they're all similar. The Patriots are not on the same step as them, though, and they need to understand that. The Patriots can't come into this season and expect to compete for the division. They also can't come into this season and expect to compete for a wild card spot because of how deep this AFC is. This is a really, really deep AFC. They just need to show some promise. And if promise is all that shows and they still end up being one of the worst teams in the league, that's fine. You just don't want to come out there and come away with a season like the Panthers just did with Bryce Young, right? You want to sit there and be, hey, there's some promise here. Bryce Young, I still believe in him, but he has to prove it this season, otherwise it's done. Drake May, we don't know if he's going to play. It's a true quarterback competition between him, Joe Milton, and Jacoby Brissett. It seems like Jacoby Brissett has the lead right now. I don't expect him to start all 17 games this season, but they need to see something out of Drake May, out of Gerard Mayo, in order to say, yes, we made the right choice. Yes, we'd like to continue down this path. That is what a successful season looks like for the Patriots. Buckle in, New England fans. It's not going to be a great season. And, anything can happen in football. I could be dead wrong here. But this doesn't feel like a great season. The odds makers at Vegas have you as the worst team in the league at 5.5 as your over/under for wins. We're gonna take a quick break here. When we come back, we're gonna see if I have you guys over or under that 5.5 mark. We're gonna go through the entire New England schedule real quick. Forgot to give them a grade. They're getting a solid C. They didn't do too much, but they couldn't do too much because they aren't a draw right now. They've got guys that I think could be really good or could be complete busts. So we'll see how they develop after this season. That is a C that could either turn to an F or an A 5 years from now. That's how volatile this offseason is for the Patriots. But anyway, we're going to take a quick break, come back, go over their schedule game by game, and give them a record prediction. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking all about the Patriots offseason. The big addition / loss, you will say, is at the quarterback and head coach areas with Bill Belichick out, Gerard Mayo in, and the third overall pick of the draft, the shining future of the Patriots organization, Drake May. We'll see how that goes. I gave them a C. We talked about Brandon Ayuk, how the Patriots are out on him for probably reasons of Ayuk saying no, if I'm being honest with you, as well as the White Sox winning their first game in 27 days, their first time in 21 games that they win, finally breaking that streak. As well as Lauri Markkanen signing a massive extension, and Jim Harbaugh getting a slap on the wrist. Really, Michigan starting to go through the ringer for everything Jim Harbaugh did when he was with the Wolverines. In this segment, we're finishing up our coverage of the New England Patriots. We're taking a look at their schedule, going game by game, taking a look at everything that they have this season, seeing if they can get over or under that 5.5 win total that is being put out there by Vegas. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you are on YouTube, instead on the GSMC Sports Network, all you have to do, there should be a super chat button on the bottom of this live stream. Go and do that. Same thing, a message should pop up. I appreciate anything you guys do give. If you have a burning question about sports or anything at all, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off our show today talking about the New England Patriots season preview. We have a kind of a tougher schedule than a lot of other teams in this division, especially at the beginning of it. They have a lot of really talented teams to start off their season. It does get a little bit easier down the stretch, kind of the opposite of the Dolphins' schedule here. They have a Week 14 bye, which for a team that's contending or a team that's trying to get a wild card spot, I think is tough. Now, if they're in a good position at that Week 14 bye, they're nice and rested for the playoffs. If they're in that position, that's a good spot. But it's a little late in the season for me. Again, not the toughest schedule, but we'll go through, see what kind of record we give them. Like I said, not an easy schedule. The win total for them is set at 5.5 by Vegas. And they start off a tough road game against the newly healthy Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And that's not going to start off well. I don't think Drake May is starting week 1. We're probably going to have Jacoby Brissett starting that game. But the Bengals, I have winning this game, starting off the season 0-1. Then the next game is at home against the Seahawks. And again, I don't think we see Drake May probably until around week 6 or week 7, if I'm being completely honest with you. But Jacoby Brissett is a solid backup quarterback. I still don't think that this Patriots team is going to be enough. I think they lose to the Seahawks here, fall to 0-2. Week 3 against the Jets on the road. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are here. They'll be better than the Patriots, just to put it bluntly. Like I said, they're kind of on a tier above them for now. They fall to 0-3, and it doesn't get any easier for the rest for the next couple weeks. They take on the Jets in week 3, the Niners on the road in week 4, the Dolphins at home, the Texans at home as well, and then they go on the road to take on the Jaguars. This is not an easy beginning of the schedule. So after the Jets, they take on those 49ers, and that's not going to go well either. I hate to break it to you, but the 49ers take care of business. The Patriots fall to 0-4 here. Then they get the Dolphins, and the Dolphins and the Patriots have an interesting relationship, right? The Dolphins are really good at losing to the Patriots when they are in Miami, but this one is in New England, and I'm giving this one to the Dolphins. The Patriots fall to 0-5 on this young season for going and taking on CJ Stroud, the team, and the Texans, the team they hope to emulate this year, not going as well as I think they wanted to. The Texans take care of business in week 6. They fall into 0-6, and then they take on the Jaguars. On the road at the Jaguars, and again, I was going a little back and forth on this game, but I believe in this Jaguars team, and I don't really believe in this Patriots team. They fall to 0-7. A tough look at this point is where I actually would assume they make that quarterback switch, maybe even earlier, maybe around that Texans game. So from now on, we're looking at a team that has Drake May under center. And I think having that in their system, a home game against the Jets, they take care of business, get their first win. They improve to 1-7 on the year. Then they go to Tennessee, take on the Tennessee Titans with Will Levis under center there. I think they win that game as well. Again, I think this defense is going to be good, and especially with a weak offensive line, I think teams might struggle a little bit with that. But the Titans lose in week 9. They improve to 2-7 on the year. Then they get Caleb Williams and the Bears. Battle of top quarterbacks from this draft. On the road, Caleb Williams and the Bears take care of business. They fall to 2-8. Week 11, Matthew Stafford and the Rams. I just think the Rams are better. The Rams win this game 2-9 through 11 weeks on the season. 2 weeks until the bye, they get the Dolphins and Colts before them. This is in Miami, and I talked a little bit about that before. Week 12 in Miami. I think the Dolphins, the Dolphins at this point are actually undefeated in my rankings. I think the Patriots beat them, cancel their undefeated season, as the Dolphins are kind of looking ahead to a brutal schedule from week 13 on. But the Dolphins here lose. The Patriots improve to 3-9 on the year. Then they host the Indianapolis Colts, and I think this game could go either way, but I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here to the Patriots. I don't think they're going to be the worst. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in football. So we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. Week 13, winning 2 straight games heading into the bye at 4-9. Again, basically out of playoff contention at this point. They've got a couple weeks left in the season. They still have to take on the Bills twice, and then they get the Cardinals and the Chargers in between those. So it's it's not a super tough schedule down the stretch after the bye, but it's not the easiest. The Cardinals, Kyler Murray, I think, is going to run circles around them. I think Kyler Murray is just a mismatch for this Patriots team. The Cardinals win this game. In Glendale here, they fall to 4-10. Week 16 on the road against the Bills. Josh Allen and the Bills need this to get into playoff contention. They need to win all of these games down the stretch to make the playoffs. They are fired up in this one, and I think they beat the Patriots here. The Patriots fall to 4-11. Then they take on the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. We talked about Jim Harbaugh a lot earlier on in our show. I'm giving the Chargers a loss here as the Patriots improve to 5-11, heading into their final game of the season, a division game, taking on the Bills. And again, the Bills need this to make the playoffs. They might not even make the playoffs if they do win, but the Bills are going to win this game. Josh Allen is just too good for this team. The Patriots fall to 5-12 on the year. They are missing the playoffs. Now, I do think that this is a season to be expected. I don't think people should expect out of the Patriots a great season. And I don't think people are expecting a great season out of the Patriots, to be completely honest with you. And that's probably a good thing to temper the expectations. They are, as I said, Vegas's favorite to be the worst team in football. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it is. This is a Patriots team that needed a deep reset, and they might have gotten it with Drake May. Now, I will be honest with you, I was way off on the Texans last season. I didn't think they'd make that jump. I had the Texans, I don't remember what I had them going, but I think I had them winning like 6 games. They end up winning 10. CJ Stroud becomes this great quarterback out of nowhere. So maybe I'm completely wrong about this Patriots team. But let me know what you think about what the Patriots are going to do this season. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I have them going 5-12. Again, this is not a season that really matters. Honestly, they could lose every single game. And all that would tell them is, okay, this is not the direction to go in. This is a season for the Patriots that only matters as far as trying to figure out a path to go on down the future, right? This is a season that the record-wise does not really matter, to be completely honest with you. So I've been going 5-12, probably ending up with a higher draft pick in the NFL draft, but we'll see what happens. Let me know what you think. Again, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back here same time, same place, talking about all of the major news around sports. Before we go, we did finish the AFC East. I totally forgot to give you guys that. We'll go over the AFC East standings right here. Now we have all 4 teams predicted out fully. In 4th place, we have the New England Patriots that we have gone over here. They go 5-12, miss out on the season on the playoffs. In 3rd place, we have the Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills fall to 9-8 after winning 11 games last season. I just don't love what they did this offseason. They miss the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. Now we have a tie at the top of the division. Both the Dolphins and the Jets I have at 11-6. They're both going to make the playoffs, but I'm giving the division win to the New York Jets because of tiebreakers. I do have the Dolphins losing both games in their season series to the New York Jets, and because of that, the Jets have the tiebreaker and go on to win the division. But yeah, that's the AFC East for you. We'll do a Super Bowl thing once we finish up with the AFC. We'll do a full playoffs then. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for watching today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, tuning in, and listening to the episode today. Again, you can leave a chat or anything in the future episodes on YouTube. We'll give you shout outs there. We'll see you tomorrow for all the breaking news around the world of sports. Maybe we get some Brandon Ayuk news by tomorrow. But anyway, I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go.